Hey guys, Brian Schultz here with Cape Falcon Kayak, and the video that you're about to check out is an excerpt from my 3.5 hour long online small boat camping series that's available on the Cape Falcon website. This video series is literally the distillation of everything that I've learned over 25 years of camping out of all different kinds of small boats. There's dozens of videos covering every topic to do with paddling gear, every topic to do with camping gear, how to pack all that stuff up together efficiently, and what things make sense to purchase for what reasons in what situations. So tons of great information there, including a 4-page PDF checklist so you can check all your items off before you head out the door, make sure you don't leave anything behind, and also some supplemental material that's been written by some of the most experienced small boat campers that I know. So it's a great series. It's only $12 for 3.5 hours of video. This video is just one excerpt from that. Enjoy the video. So let's pretend like we're going camping for a week-long trip. Whenever I roll up to a put-in, I've got 2 big bags with me. I've got a big IKEA bag that has all my paddling gear in it, and then I've got one large IKEA bag that has all the gear I'm gonna go camping for a week. Now, the reason I only use one big IKEA bag is because I know that anything that I can fit in this bag is gonna fit in the kayak. And this gives me a really good sanity check before I leave the house. If I have more stuff than fits in this bag, I've got too much stuff with me. So here on top of the bag, I have the float bags that all this stuff is gonna go into. These 2 bags are manufactured by Track Kayaks, and they're a tiny bit small, but they're pretty good match for the skin boats that I have. And these are combination air/gear bags. And I'm gonna start by packing the bow bag here. And the first thing I'm gonna put in is my tent. Now, the tent here, I'll just go ahead, shove this all the way to the bottom of the bag. Sometimes there's a little bit of room in there. And when you do this a little bit, you'll get used to kind of shaping your gear a little bit before you put it in the bag to really maximize the space that you have. Next thing I'm gonna put in is my sleeping bag. And then next to the sleeping bag, I usually put my clothes, or if my sleeping bag is a little too big, I'll put my camping mat right in here as well. So I'm gonna take my camping mat. Now, your camping mat doesn't necessarily have to be in its own dry bag, but I usually put it in there. And that fits really nicely right next to the sleeping bag. And then finally, I'll take my clothing bag and I'm gonna turn it on its side, and I'm just gonna slide it in just like this. And that's everything that's gonna go in the bow bag of the kayak. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and roll this up just like this. It's important to roll these up really cleanly because that helps to keep the water out of them. Usually roll it at least 3 or 4 times if you want to get a good airtight seal on this. And then I'm going to slide it into the bow of the kayak. And this is really easy with my kayaks because all I do is I pull my foot braces back all the way. I reach in just like this. And this whole thing slides forward really nice. And that whole bag just perfectly tucks up into this area. And then all I have to do is slide my foot braces forward, and that helps lock it in place. Now, some people use pulley systems where they can actually anchor the bag to the end of the kayak, and that's something I haven't done a lot of in the past because I find that these bags, and especially the bags I used before, which were the ones by Spirit Line Kayaks, were a really good friction fit, and I don't like having additional complexity if I don't need it. Recently, at people's request, I've started putting pulley systems in there, but you have to realize that if you're putting any type of a rope in your kayak that's long and kind of loose like that, you're creating a significant entanglement hazard. So I'm not going to go into that in this video, but it is something that you need to be mindful of if you're going to be pulling the float bags forward with pulleys. Anyways, got this guy all the way in there, got it locked down with my foot braces, and then finally I've got this little inflation stem here, and you can inflate it the rest of the way, and that will add a little bit more flotation into that bag, and it'll also help lock it in place. And then you can tuck the flotation stem out of the way. So now let's go ahead and talk about everything that's going to go in the stern bag. Now, unlike the bow bag, the stern bag doesn't have enough room to fully fill with gear and then slide into the back of the kayak. So what I usually do here is I actually use a stick and I put it into the bag itself, and I use that to slide this all the way to the back of the kayak. So lift up my back band here, slide this in like this. And it's a pretty easy way to get it in there. Now, as I was saying before, if you're someone who wants to have lines and pulleys inside your kayak, that's fine as well. You can actually just hook it onto your pulley and pull it all the way to the back. I've never really done it that much because I find this to be easier, but totally up to you. So go ahead and take my stick out, and now I'm gonna go ahead and just load the gear that I have left. Now, most of what I have left is my heavy stuff. So my cooking gear, my food, my water, all that stuff goes behind here. Stuff that's a little bit smaller, but it's also a little bit heavier. So I'm gonna start by just putting small stuff in because that stuff will slide further back. I'll put my cook kit in, I'll put my fuel bottle in. And now I can pack my food as well. I've got one food bag here, goes right behind the seat. And then I've got another food bag that goes right beside it. And that pretty much fills up this whole space in here. If you were going for an even longer trip or you wanted to bring more stuff, there is a little bit of extra space. In both the bow and the stern bag, you could fit another 13-liter dry sack. But this is usually everything I bring with me for a week-long trip. So I'm gonna go ahead and fold this up now. And it's a little trickier to roll this up while it's in the kayak like this, but it's still very doable. You just wanna make sure that you roll it. I'm not sure what Track's instructions say. They might say 3 or 4 times. As many times as you can get it rolled up tightly, clip it together. And it's worth taking extra care when you do this, especially when it's in this location, because if you don't get a good roll seal on that, it's not going to be able to hold air, and then it won't work as a dual air and gear bag. Now, the old style gear bags I used to use, the ones from Skin Boat School, which are the Bedarka bags sold by Corey Friedman at skinboats.com, those were nice because they had a separate gear and a separate air chamber. But these ones that I'm using these days from Track only have one gear and air chamber, so it's important to make sure that you get a good seal. So once I've got the stern completely loaded here, there's usually a bit of space between the front of the rolled up float bag and the backrest here. And this is a great place to put your water if you're on a trip where you need to haul water for a few days. Now, if you're somewhere like Baja or the Sea of Cortez where you might have between 2 to even 5 or 6 days where you can't get water, you're gonna need to carry it with you. And the way that I usually do that is with these 10-liter MSR dromedary bags. These things are great because they hold a lot of water in a really small space, and they conform to awkward spaces. And that's good because it allows your center of gravity to stay nice and low in the kayak, and also nice and centered in the kayak as well, so you're not compromising your stability or your handling with your water. So what I usually do with these, if I just have one, is I'll fill it up and I will slide it sideways, and it'll fit right down in here, touching the back of my butt and touching the front of the float bag. And that's pretty easy. There's plenty of room for that. But if you're on a trip where you're going to be out for 5 or even 6 days without water, then you need to pack 2 of those. And that gets a little bit trickier. In that case, I use that extra space that I talked about a little bit earlier in the ends of either the front or the stern bag here. And I really pack myself efficiently so I can roll this float bag all the way up to right about here. And that gives me enough room to put 2 of these 10-liter MSR dromedary bags side by side in the back of the kayak. And there's some other things to know about these, so make sure that you check out the separate video for these, because there's a few caveats with working with these things that if you don't follow them, you can end up in kind of, you know, a difficult or even dangerous situation. Now, a couple more things I want to talk about before I go here are my ditch bag. Now, this is the bag I talked about earlier in the video series. I keep this between my legs in my lap. And this is actually a fairly big ditch bag. This is new to me. It's the Watershed Chachuga bag. It's a 30-liter bag. And honestly, I wish that this thing was about 25 or even 20 liters, but they only make them in 15 and 30-liter sizes because that would bring the bulk down just a little bit. And what's inside of this is everything I talked about in the ditch bag video. So my first aid equipment, my emergency gear, all my food and supplies for the day. And the idea behind a ditch bag day bag is something that you can get to really easily to get the supplies you need on the water, and then also something that will have some emergency kit in case you end up in a situation where you've lost your boat or other kind of emergency situation. So that guy goes right between my legs, and I load it right as I'm paddling away from shore. Now, the last thing I bring with me is something I haven't talked about yet. I haven't even made a video about it, and I'm not going to go too much into this, but I usually bring a diver's whiteboard. These are designed for people underwater to be able to write notes to each other or to themselves. And this is where I organize all of my navigational information for the day. And I find that ever since I started doing this, I am a much more effective kayak navigator. And this guy sits on my deck right here. And I still have access to whatever charts or other navigational information that I need, but this is usually the only thing that's out right in front of me. So it's a nice compact little package, and I'm not dealing with chart bags or other things on deck. So that is everything that I pack into a sea kayak for camping for a week-long trip. I have stretched this system even up to 2 weeks before, but it does get a little bit tight. Of course, if you're going to be doing that kind of paddling, you could always just get or bring a bigger boat. You know, I feel like if you're going on really, really long expeditions, although you can certainly use a skin boat, you can build a skin boat as big as you want, I think that's where it starts to make sense to get just a regular fiberglass or plastic boat, because without the room of the frame inside the kayak, then you've got a lot more room to pack gear. The caveat being that you're in a boat that you didn't get to build yourself and is significantly heavier. The nice thing about this thing is that the base boat here weighs 30 pounds, and the kit with all of my food for the entire week usually weighs less than 35 pounds. So we're talking about kayak and gear total package of around 65 pounds. And that is really nice because a lot of people's boats alone weigh 65 pounds. And when you've gone down that far in your weight, you're gonna notice a huge difference, not only in your efficiency and your top speed, but in also how the boat handles on the water.